Hi everyone, my name's Caleb and this is Megan. We're with the Arizona Department of Revenue, the Education and Outreach Unit. And today we're going to be discussing a brief, very high-level overview of marijuana taxation in Arizona. So we're going to start here with the statutory responsibilities. So what I'll do is share these 6 slides that contain the statutory responsibilities the Department of Revenue has as a state agency. And while the department may aid in the legislative process of developing technically sound and administratively feasible policies, the mandate actually comes from the legislature and then is signed into law by the governor. It's important to note that the statutory authority is in Titles 42 and 43 of the Arizona Revised Statutes. So I'll just go ahead and click through these slides so that you're able to read them on your own. And also want to mention that the Department of Revenue's mission is to serve our taxpayers. So never hesitate to reach out to us and ask questions. Especially the education unit, we're here to help in any way we can in making sure that everything is being done correctly and avoiding any type of needless penalties or anything like that. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation here. If you are able to, email us for marijuana industry questions, dispensaryservice@azdor.gov, or for general tax questions, educationunit@azdor.gov. So we'll get started with the agenda here. First, we'll discuss the news and updates, how to receive the reminders and updates month to month, definitions of important terms to this industry, how to get started with licensing, filing frequency and thresholds, tax rates, business codes, the business codes that determine the tax rates, exemption certificates, deduction codes, best reporting practices, how to pay your liabilities, and then we'll finish with resources and contact information. So if you go to azdor.gov, just at the home page of the screen, you should see a pop-up here that'll allow you to subscribe for texts or email updates. You can choose what types of updates you'd like to receive. And once you've gotten that subscription completed, then you'll receive monthly emails for sure. And if anything important comes up, then you'll receive something there. If the pop-up doesn't appear when you navigate to the web page, you can scroll to the bottom of the screen and there will be a link to subscribe for updates, which will take you to the same place there. We also have a web page on azdor.gov that you can visit to see information relating directly to the marijuana industry, adult use, medical, and dual use. You'll see some very nice stuff to know, like registration and licensing tips, definitions, filing requirements, and some frequently asked questions as well. So we'll start by defining marijuana and marijuana products. According to the Arizona Revised Statute 36-2850, the marijuana is all parts of the plant, every compound, manufacture, salt, derivative, mixture, or preparation of the plant, or its seeds or resin. Marijuana products are composed of marijuana and other ingredients that are intended for use or consumption, including edible products, ointments, and tinctures. Next is defining a dispensary versus an establishment. A dispensary is a place as defined by DHS and statute, a place where medicines are prepared and provided. In this case, dispensaries are facilities that sell only medical marijuana and its ancillary products. An establishment is considered an entity licensed by the Department of Health Services to operate one single retail location where the licensee may sell adult use or dual use marijuana to those who are at least 21 years of age. So to define transaction privilege tax, transaction privilege tax in Arizona is a tax on the privilege of engaging in certain taxable activities in the state. The liability is placed on the seller or the vendor who may choose to pass that tax on to the purchaser. The tax is levied on the gross proceeds or gross income derived from the business, and marijuana dispensaries and adult use establishments in Arizona are subject to state and local retail TPT on their sales of marijuana and other products sold. So for marijuana excise tax, under Proposition 207, in addition to TPT, the adult use marijuana is subject to a 16% state marijuana excise tax. This excise tax is a tax on the net sales of the establishment, not the gross proceeds or gross income like the transaction privilege tax. So it's a separate tax, and it's reported using the form MET-1 instead of the TPT form TPT-2. So to have the ability to file and pay the MET, an adult use marijuana retailer has to register with ADOR for a TPT license and an MET registration. So there will be more on these two subjects later on, very shortly here. So transaction privilege tax and marijuana excise tax, what's the difference? So it's important to remember that MET is different from TPT because they're in addition to one another. So both are being accounted for. So TPT is the total value collected or derived from the sale of the marijuana or any other tangible personal property without any deduction on the cost of goods sold, expenses of any kind, or losses. So this is the gross income tax. And then MET is a tax on the sale price to the final customer of the adult use marijuana and does not include taxes collected or factored. So another important thing to remember about the MET is that it'll be included in the gross receipts figure of the TPT tax base and then deducted from that tax base using a special deduction code for the marijuana industry, 807. So, and we'll go over that. So a gross receipts tax and then a net sales tax. That's the main thing to remember. Next is use tax. So general use tax is a tax on goods purchased from an out-of-state vendor when that vendor didn't collect the tax. So you purchase like a POS machine for your store and you don't pay tax when you purchase it. You have it delivered to your Arizona business and you start using it throughout the course of that business. So because you didn't pay use tax when you purchased the item, you're now going to owe use tax on the purchase of that POS machine because it's being used in Arizona throughout the regular course of business. So in general, if you're going to use, store, or consume the item in Arizona, use tax applies if you didn't pay use tax when you made the original purchase. So depending on the city which the business operates, it could be state use tax as well as city use tax. And also keep in mind that there are a number of cities that don't have a use tax rate in their jurisdiction. Also, so you'll have to refer to the tax rate table in order to figure that out. And the use tax rate is based on the use tax paid is based on the cost of the item without shipping or markup or anything like that. So next is use tax from inventory, which is a little bit different from the regular use tax. The primary difference is that the goods that were purchased were originally purchased to be resold. So you have, we'll do a definition here. So use tax from inventory could apply to, but is not limited to items like products sent to a testing facility and then later destroyed, which applies to this industry, and then products used for free samples. So something to note about this is that this business classification corresponds directly to column O on the MET form. So use tax should be reported on the TPT return for items tested and destroyed during the testing process, products that were distributed free of charge to staff, customers, or anyone else for any purpose, and items removed by the inventory by the business for its own use. So if you sell retail and you use a 5000A resale certificate to purchase t-shirts, you now decide that you want to use these t-shirts as advertising. So you originally purchased the t-shirts tax exempt because you were planning on selling them in the future. Then you give a batch of your t-shirts to your employees and they start wearing them in the store to promote the sale of those shirts. You would now owe use tax on the cost of those shirts because you're now the end user of those shirts. So a basic example. Also something to note with this, if a vendor is given free samples by a manufacturer or wholesaler, then the wholesaler is considered the end user and is responsible for the tax. So if a business buys items as tax exempt for the purpose of sale for resale, then those items are used or given away, then the business is the end user and will be responsible for the tax. So now we've defined some things. We'll talk about getting started with licensing and how to do that, who's required. This is a table that's available on azdor.gov that shows the different types of marijuana vendors and their TPT and MET requirements. So you can review this list on azdor.gov. There's that marijuana quick check link that was at the beginning of the presentation. And just as an example, wholesalers and manufacturers are required to obtain a TPT license. So even though that the majority of their tax liabilities will be zero, they still have to obtain a TPT license and then report that they had zero gross sales, taking the proper deduction codes and advising the department like why they don't have to pay tax on those transactions. So check out the table if you need clarification on that, or you can email us or call us. So next is the types of marijuana retail TPT licenses. So the three types are medical, adult use, and then dual licensees. Medical marijuana would be reporting under the medical marijuana code and would only be subject to the TPT. It's not subject to the MET. For dual use and adult use, they're going to use the other code, the adult use recreational marijuana retail sales, and they would have to report for transaction privilege tax and marijuana excise tax. So just make sure to remember that. For adult use only, it would only be the adult use recreational marijuana retail code. So, and that's 420. So, but all retailers, regardless of their licensing type, is required to complete the form JTM1, which is the after the licensure from ADHS is obtained. And then that's our application to be able to either convert an existing license into the proper, the new type of license that we have for this industry, or to apply for a brand new one, either way. So this is the first page of that JTM1. It's 4 pages in total, and it's only completed by those in the marijuana industry. to apply for a license to report transaction privilege tax, marijuana excise tax, and withholding tax. So, and again, whether you're already licensed or not, we still need this if you haven't submitted one to convert the existing TPT license into the proper MET registration, even for medical only. So at this time, the application has to be completed by paper, and you can find that on azdor.gov. You can print that form, make sure to read all the instructions, fill out all the fields properly, and everything that's marked with an asterisk, make sure to complete that field. Incomplete forms will not be processed, and once the form has been completed, you can mail it, drop it off, or email it back to the Department of Revenue. These are the resources there. Email is expected to be about a 48-hour processing time if you email it to aztaxhelp@azdor.gov. And if you drop it off in person or mail it, then that's expected to be about a week to process that paper one. Once you have successfully applied for your MET and TPT registration with the JTM1, then you'll receive an Arizona Transaction Privilege Tax Successful Registration Letter. And so there's going to be a few things that come with this. It's going to have your TPT license number, what type of TPT license you've registered for, medical, adult use, or dual use. It lists the start date of the business and the applicable filing frequency. There's also information about the location codes, what forms to use when reporting, and the due date for those forms. The licensing information, if you have to update anything at a later date, then you can submit a business account update form. That's 10193, and send that to the department to be processed. On the back of the letter, you'll see some additional information, some contact information, information on electronic services, and some links. And then at the very end, you'll see the TPT license certificate. And on this certificate, you'll have the TPT license number, the start date, issued date, and expiration date. And those are good for 1 calendar year from, 1 calendar year. You'll also have the entity to which the license was approved, the location information that was on the JTM1 form, and the business codes, region codes, and jurisdiction of those. So the next is the same, except it's the marijuana excise tax registration letter. So the same thing, you apply for your license with the JTM1, you're going to receive, if you're a dual use or adult use establishment, then you'll receive the TPT registration letter and the MET registration letter. And this is going to have your MET registration number, the type of tax that you report with this registration number, when you should begin reporting, and the filing frequency. It's also going to have some information relating to the MET, like what form to use, which is the MET1, MET-1, what you need when you're filling out that form, the due date of the form, and some other information like other taxes that might need to be filed with the MET, like the TPT. So what happens if I purchase an existing business with a valid TPT license and MET registration? So this happens a lot, and unfortunately, TPT licenses and excise tax registrations are non-transferable. So if you're a person or entity purchasing an existing business, then you would have to have the previous owner cancel their license, and then you would have to submit your own joint application in order to have that opened under your separate entity so that things are kept straight. The power of attorney form, Form 285, is a very important form. If you have folks other than the officers that were listed on your JTM1 form, then you'll need to submit one of these forms in order to appoint someone to be able to discuss private information regarding your business with the Department of Revenue. And that's so they can make changes or file for the business. In order for us to make any changes on someone's behalf, we have to have that form on file. And with that form, you can also revoke. So if you have someone you need to remove, then you can use the same form in order to take away those privileges. So for TPT license renewals, like I said earlier, they're only valid for the calendar year that it was issued in. So licenses must be renewed by January 1st. That's the statutory due date. And then the renewal is considered delinquent if not received on or before the last business day of January. So that's when it becomes delinquent, technically. So, but during the renewal period, towards the beginning of the year, when you're thinking about renewing, that's when you want to review the information that you have on file with the Department of Revenue, make sure that we have the correct contact information, addresses, and make sure that all of the correct people are listed as power of attorney or officer and are able to speak with us. So just to make sure that we always have up-to-date information in case you need to get a hold of us or we need to get a hold of you, either way. We also strongly encourage everyone to file and pay on aztaxes.gov. This makes filing faster and renewals are faster. It's also good to note that the MET registrations do not expire and do not need to be renewed annually. So filing frequency and thresholds for filing and payments. So to determine the appropriate filing frequency, first you estimate the annual combined state, county, and municipal tax liability. If that combined estimated liability is less than $2,000 per year, then you have the option to file annually, once per year. If that estimated liability is between $2,000 and $8,000 per year, then you're able to file quarterly, if you like. And if it's more than $8,000, then you'll be required to file monthly. So you can always update your filing frequency by submitting a business account update form. And the effective date for the new frequency will depend on when the request was received and the current filing frequency. The current period has to end before it can be updated to the new frequency. However, the majority of dispensaries and marijuana establishments will probably fall into the monthly filing frequency, so that should be easy. Now we have thresholds for electronic payments and filing. So starting in 2021, any TPT taxpayer with an annual liability of $500 or more must file electronically. So this is just reflective of the department's move away from paper and towards electronic filing. So next are tax rates. Tax rates are the percentage at which your entity is taxed. The total tax rate is going to be a combination of the state, county, and city tax rates. And you can find these rates of tax on the tax rate tables located at azdor.gov. The rates are going to be different depending on the business classification, like what type of business you're operating, and the location of the business, the city and county. There are going to be two tables on the tax rate tables. Above those, at the very beginning of the page, there are some updates that you can check out each month to make sure nothing's changed. Table 1 is going to have the state and county tax rates. It's going to have the county region codes. It's going to have the accounting credit rates. So the accounting credit rates we'll talk about in a moment. Table 2 is going to be a list of the city rates and the city codes, as well as the region codes, business codes, and tax rates, and the county for each city. So the city table is very long, and actually below the table 2 on the tax rate table, the marijuana industry has its own 2 tax rate tables that are there, but you can check it out on azdor.gov. And again, we have a full-length workshop that we do if you'd like to register for that on azdor.gov as well. and we'll go into more detail on some of these topics here. The next way to find your tax rate is to go to aztaxes.gov. There we have the Arizona tax rate lookup tool. What we would do here is enter our street address. Once we click search, we will see a drop-down list from which we can choose the business description and business code of the type of business activity that we do. We would select that business description, and then it would give us a list of tax rates that would be applicable to my business activity for my location. These codes are always current, and if you have multiple business activities, like if you have retail and adult use marijuana, then you'll have to look up both of those business codes separately in order to make sure that you're using the correct tax rate, because they may be different. So adult use marijuana TPT business codes, just a few here. So it does say dual licensee that sells both, but it's actually, if you elect to become a licensee that sells adult use marijuana only, then you would use the code for adult use marijuana retail sales, which is 420, non-marijuana retail sales, which is 017, use tax, the general use tax, which is 029, and use tax from inventory, which is 030. And again, if you have other business codes, then you'll want to look those up, make sure you have the right rates, and use those as needed. So, like was previously stated, in addition to the retail TPT, adult use and recreational marijuana retail sales are also subject to the 16% state marijuana excise tax. So this tax has to be reported on the form MET1, which is separate from and in addition to form TPT-2. Since the TPT, transaction privilege tax, is a gross receipts tax, then the MET is included in the figure reported on the TPT for the 420 business code, adult use marijuana retail sales. And then you deduct that from your tax base using deduction code 807. So we'll briefly discuss exemption certificates, document and establish a basis for state and city tax deductions and exemptions. It has to be filled out completely by the purchaser and furnished to the vendor at the time of the sale. Incomplete certificates are not considered to be accepted in good faith, and only one category of exemption may be claimed on a certificate. So the vendor has to keep this certificate for audit purposes. So the purchaser will actually provide this certificate to the vendor for their records. So TPT is imposed on the person doing business in Arizona. However, only the purchaser can execute that exemption certificate. So when you are claiming to have an exempt purchase, you as the purchaser would provide the vendor with that certificate. There's a few popular forms here, more of the common ones. The Form 5000 is the Exemption Certificate General, and it's a general exemption certificate that cannot be used for to claim a sale for resale. That's what the Form 5000A is. So the Form 5000A will allow you to document the purchase of tangible personal property for resale in the purchaser's regular course of business. So those t-shirts, I'm selling them. I buy them tax-free because I plan on selling them in the future and during my regular course of business. The multi-state tax commission exemption form. This certificate may be used only when making purchases of tangible personal property for resale in the ordinary course of business, and it is only valid as a resale certificate if it contains the purchaser's name, address, signature, Arizona transaction privilege tax number, license number. That's the only time it's valid as a resale certificate, the multi-state tax commission exemption form. Exemption certificates can be valid for a single transaction or a time period of up to 48 months. The department doesn't recommend exceeding a 12-month period, however, because of the requirement to renew annually. When checking to see if a license is active, there is actually a license verification tool on aztaxes.gov, and you can just type in the license number that was provided on the exemption certificate, and it will let you know with a green verification status. It'll say active if it is an active and valid license. And you'll see a red verification status that indicates the license number is invalid if you enter the license number and it's not a valid license. So we recommend that you print that screen, the license verification tool, attach it to your 5000A or 5000 form, and keep that in your records as the vendor, so that way you're covered if anything ever comes up. So the exemption certificate is to be filled out completely by the purchaser, furnished to vendor at the time of sale. Then the vendor will check the validity of the certificate to make sure that the exemption corresponds to the purchaser's business activity. And if you're using an exemption to certify the basis for an exemption, the exemption certificate, then there will be corresponding deduction codes to use when you report your TPT. If your business uses any other exemption certificates for which you have questions, you can use the procedure for exemption certificates at azdor.gov. So deduction codes are codes used to deduct income that's exempt or excluded from tax as authorized by Arizona Revised Statutes and or Model City Code, Model City Tax Code. Some types of transactions are not subject to TPT and can be deducted from the tax base, like the MET example mentioned earlier. To claim the deductions on an exempted transaction, the deduction must be listed on the Schedule A of the TPT form, whether filed paper or electronically, and only deduction codes using the correct business code will be allowed. So each business class has a specific list of deductions that are allowed, and by submitting your returns on AZ Taxes, you'll only see deductions that are available to you for choosing. However, if you file by paper, then there is a list of deduction codes at azdor.gov, and you'll have to go through that list and determine what codes are valid for your course of business. If those are incorrect, then your deduction may be disallowed, which would result in a balance on your account, and we don't want that. So make sure they're valid. Some common deduction codes for this industry are 503, which is for sales for resale, 551 for tax factored or collected, 807 for marijuana excise tax factored or collected. So some best reporting practices when filing your TPT and MET is that if you have more than one license, you want to make sure to maintain separate records. And if you have multiple business activities under this one license, then you want to maintain separate records for each classification. So medical and adult use, for example, you know, keep those separate. If separate records are not maintained and provided during an audit, then the business will be taxed at the highest tax rate by the auditor. For an example, if you're selling adult use, the simplest example is you're selling adult use marijuana and you're also selling your ancillary products. So the adult use marijuana would be the 420 business code, report all of that under that code, and then 017 for retail sales for any ancillary products that you're selling. So for aztaxes.gov, it's the department's online platform in order to be able to file and pay taxes electronically. Transaction privilege and marijuana excise taxes can both be filed and paid using aztaxes.gov. Filing electronically will allow the returns to process faster and result in fewer errors. We also have some job aids and video tutorials that are available on our website. Then that will offer you step-by-step guidance. For those taxpayers that do file electronically, They will receive an increased accounting credit rate, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So due dates, TPT returns are due on the 20th of the month following the reporting period and considered delinquent if not received by the department on or before the last business day of such a month. So, and any business day, a business day is any day except Saturday, Sunday, or a legal Arizona state holiday. Excise tax returns are a little bit different. They're due on the 20th of the month as well, following the reporting period, and are considered late or delinquent if not received within 10 calendar days of the due date. So slightly different, but important to note. It also, returns have to be on file even when no sales were made. So that would be just a zero return. Amended returns, so if you have to update a previously filed return, whether it's for TPT or MET, then remember that the amended return completely replaces the original financially. So for the form MET1, amended returns are triggered when an adjustment has to be made to the tax computation section of the form, which would be the net sales. The entire form, the inventory on the back of that page, also has to be completed along with it because it's replacing the old one. It's not necessary to carry the schedule adjustments forward to the subsequent months. And if you need more information on amending, then you can check out the instructions or email us as well. So accounting credits, this credit is valid only for TPT. There are no credits currently available for MET. The accounting credit is a credit given just for filing on time. Timely electronic filers will receive an accounting credit rate of 1.2% up to $12,000 for the year. Timely paper filers receive an accounting credit of 1% up to $10,000 for the year. And also important to note that not all business activity codes are entitled to the credit. So you can check that out on the tax rate table. In the far right column in Table 1, you'll see if there is a accounting credit available for your business activity and region. Also, it's up to the business owner to decide how and when to claim this credit. DOR will not automatically add this credit to your returns. It's the business owner's responsibility to make sure to calculate that. So for smaller businesses, they might claim the credit monthly and never even reach the maximum threshold. And larger businesses might claim the credit and reach that threshold sooner. And again, this is a credit only for TPT, not MET. So this is the MET-1 form. This is what you would use, this is what you're filing electronically on AZ Taxes, or this is what the paper form would look like. The Department of Revenue requires businesses to file and report their monthly marijuana excise tax due on adult sales of recreational marijuana, so adult recreational marijuana. You can use this form to report liability on adult use or recreational marijuana, report inventory changes, which is this second page here. You can amend a previously filed MET-1 form or file a final return so that you can cancel this MET registration, ending it beginning at the end of the period that you're filing for. It's important to note that when an adult use or dual use establishment is filing the necessary returns for the filing period, the MET-1 should be completed first, since it's a tax on the net sales of adult use and recreational marijuana sold to the final consumer. This number is then added to the gross receipts of the adult use or dual use establishment's TPT return, then deducted from the tax base using the 807 deduction code. So it'll be very difficult to complete the TPT return before completing the MET-1 and be able to claim that credit. So this is an example of the TPT-2, the transaction privilege tax form. It's about 7 pages in length and cannot be processed properly if even one of these 7 pages are missing. They're all separate pages for state and county transaction details, city transaction details, state and county deductions, and then city deductions. So it's quite cumbersome, so we really recommend that you just get registered on aztaxes.gov and file electronically if possible. So a few notes about payment. If my business is statutorily required to file online, aren't I statutorily required to pay online as well? That's correct. So, but there is a waiver that you can request. If you submit the Form 292, complete that, and send it back to the department, then you can request to have that requirement to file and pay electronically waived, depending on the reason that you put on the form. So for cash payments for dispensaries and establishments can currently be done only by appointment at Phoenix and Tucson. In order to reduce the wait time, the department requires appointments to make a payment for in-person assistance. And this can be done by emailing aztaxhelp@azdor.gov. In order to avoid lobby traffic and reduce security risk, we recommend that dispensaries and establishments make these appointments for some time during the last 2 weeks of the month and vary the dates and times of those appointments, just to be safe. The IRS Form 8300 is something that will be required when making a cash payment over $10,000. So even if there are separate payments, if they are related payments going towards paying the same liability, then those are considered related and may require the IRS Form 8300. So a couple of tips: make an appointment to avoid the 20th, which is a busy day, and the second to last business day of the month. Have your IRS Form 8300 filled out before the appointment if needed. Print or bring with you a copy of your TPT return and bring that with your payment to the appointment. Count the payment before you arrive, and if you want, you can attach receipt tape to the funds to provide another layer of reconciliation. When paying by check, there's the TPT voucher that you would want to submit with your check. You're also going to want to make sure that you put the TPT license number and the corresponding filing period in the memo line of the check when you enclose it in an envelope with this form, or drop it off in the Dropbox. So this is the TPT payment voucher to make a payment when you've filed electronically. And then we have one for the MET as well. So the TPT voucher can only be used for TPT, and then the MET voucher can only be used for the MET. And it works exactly the same. Make sure to put your MET registration number on the memo line on the check, as well as the filing period that you're making a payment towards when you enclose it. And I guess that's it. These are some resources. We have the websites here, AZ Taxes, which is filing and paying essentially. There are a lot of other things you can do there. AZDOR.gov is more of our informational side, where you can find a lot of resources, all the forms. You can sign up for a workshop if you like at azdor.gov/taxpayer education. So, and we thank you so much for the opportunity. Here's some contacts for everyone. I'll leave those up at the end here. And the tax policy team is good if you need written guidance or have questions on taxability. That would be asktaxpolicy@azdor.gov. And if you have general questions, you can email us. especially with the marijuana industry, dispensary service at azdor.gov. And lastly, if you need an appointment, you can always email aztaxhelp@azdor.gov.